Releasing Trauma is sponsored by the Global Association for Trauma Recovery. The Global Association for Trauma Recovery is a social impact organization serving as a resource for survivors and their families, dedicated to facilitating change by spreading trauma-related awareness and thus creating a more trauma-informed world. Learn more at gaftr.org. Welcome to Releasing Trauma, a Survivor's Podcast. I am your host, Tracy Osborne. I am a survivor of emotional bullying, rape, sexual assault, domestic abuse, and grief. After losing my husband in 2019, I set off on a new adventure to help other women release their trauma and create a life they can cherish. Each week, I will feature a guest expert or a survivor to share their stories, tips, wisdom, and more. The goal is so that you can take away even just the smallest nugget of information you can use in your life right now to make a change, and to remind you that you're not alone. There is life after trauma, and you can move from victim to thriver and create a life you can cherish. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I am your host, Tracy Osborne. With me today is Shari Leid, and we are going to be talking about how to turn your mess into your message. And I absolutely love this because all of us with trauma have a mess. That's for sure. Shari, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me here.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. This is going to be a fun topic because it's all about turning, that chaos of your life into, something good. So
yes, absolutely.
Let's, I'd like to start off with having our guests tell us a little bit about themselves. So, share a little bit about your story.
Sure. Well, I live over in the Pacific Northwest, and by training, I was a career attorney. And as life messes will have it, because of our daughter had some special needs that we learned as she got into school, I ended up staying at home for several years. And when it came time to go back to work, my life messes kind of led me to my current role as a life coach. I coach primarily women in their middle-aged years of life, and I'm also an author.
Well, that's short and sweet. That's fantastic. I totally get all about, having a child with special needs. Mine is finally about to graduate high school.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a journey, let me tell you, especially the last couple of years.
I bet.
So yeah, I totally got it. So let's go ahead and dive into the topic, with trauma and just life in general, it's just not always sunshine and rainbows. So, how do we just start not only, cleaning up the mess, but turning it into something positive?
Well, so during our global recent mess that we're still in, the pandemic, I was taking some master classes, and one was by Robin Roberts. And in that class, she said that her mom taught her to make her mess her message. And, in Washington State, this was right in the beginning when we had stay-at-home orders put into place. I decided to ask many of my friends that question: was your mess that became your message? And you ask, how do we change these messes into something kind of useful? One woman I spoke to is actually a professional obstacle racer. Her name is Rose Wetzel. And she gave the similarity of life's messes to what she does on the obstacle course. In other words, we know that they're going to be there. We know, as especially as we get into our 40s and 50s, we know there's going to be a life mess just around the corner waiting for us. We don't know what it is though, but just like in obstacle course racing, she looks at those obstacles as not things that stop her, but things that are directing her to something else. And that really was what I heard time and time again from all these women I spoke to. Their big life messes are things that led them to something else.
I love it. I used to do obstacle racing, and I wasn't good at it, but I did it and I had a blast. I did it with one of my girls, and we had so much fun together, just challenging ourselves, helping each other, helping other people, getting filthy. It was just great. And I like that analogy because one, I can relate to it, but life is always going to hand us obstacles. And instead of looking at that big wall like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to climb over that wall, it's okay, here's a wall. How do I get over it? What's going to be on the other side? And I really like that.
And I thought it was really interesting when she told me that for she used to be a track racer. She was she graduated from Georgetown as a outdoor track racer, and then she also did indoor track racing professionally and moved into obstacle course racing. And she said that the people who are generally good, the professionals at obstacle course racing, tend to be the older athletes. Older meaning like early 30s, mid 30s, as opposed to regular track racing. So I thought that was kind of interesting that you get a little grit under you, and you're able to take on the obstacles without it getting so much into your head.
Racers that did fantastic were also younger, like kids and teens, because they didn't view it as a challenge, or not necessarily not as a challenge, but they didn't view it as something that was going to get in their way, that was going to be tough. It was, hey, this is going to be fun, let's climb over this. And my daughter, there were several obstacles, she'd get over it and she'd be like, can I go do it again? She had a blast. And that's how she approaches life. It's like, gosh, that was fun, can I do it again? And that's exactly what we need to do.
That's so great. And what happened when we were looking at these messes, we found that, well, one, a lot of people had not thought about their messes until I asked them that question, was your mess that became your message? Because a lot of times we're so busy getting through our mess, we don't have time to reflect back on it. And it was interesting, as we probably could expect now thinking about it, a lot of our messes, whether it was a loss of job, a house or an apartment we didn't get, a relationship that fell apart, whatever it was, usually if we look back, we can see where it got us to something actually better than we could have imagined, like a better job, a neighborhood that fit us better with a better maybe rent price, and a much more fulfilling relationship. So all of these messes that seemed so devastating at the time, many times when we look back, we can see that we were actually being led to something greater, better than we could have imagined.
Oh my gosh, I can't agree more. There's so many women that I talk to, or men as well, actually, who have taken their childhood adversities, whether it's childhood abuse or sexual abuse, whatever their various traumas are, and throughout their life, not just childhood, and turn it into something positive. I mean, look at me, here I am, rape, sexual assault, domestic abuse survivor. And, I have decided to turn that into my message that, there is life after trauma and you're not alone. And so many people I come across, especially during this podcast, they're doing the exact same thing. I talked to a guy yesterday who, his story was he was kidnapped at 3 by his dad, and
Wow.
And ended up going, from orphanage and foster home to leading a multi-million-dollar company and actually having a wing of a university named after him. Wow. So it's all about how we look at our adversities and how we decide we're going to let it affect us.
Definitely. I had a few physical challenges in my adult life. In my 20s, I was in a near fatal car accident and needed to learn how to walk again. In my 30s, I was diagnosed with hip dysplasia and had a double replacement. In my 40s, I was diagnosed with breast cancer and went through that. And so actually I'm telling the universe right now that I actually don't need to experience something to learn my next life lesson. But it is true, these different things, whether they are physical challenges or mental challenges, if we're able to detach from the situation, even just for a second, so we can take a step back and look at it and see maybe where our choices are and where our options are, some great growth can happen from that.
Absolutely. So, what are some first steps that people can take? They're coming out, not necessarily just coming out of, whatever their chaos is, but it's their awakening. And it's, okay, it's time to stop living in the past and, do something with my present and my future. What are some first steps they need to take?
I think a big thing is, a lot of times when we're in trauma, we're in that fight or flight stage. And fight or flight is important. It's a survival mechanism. The difficulty is if we stay in there too long, it starts to break down our own systems. And so we're not meant to be in that high level of fight or flight for so long. So a big thing is to recognize that you don't have to be there. You have a choice, and you have a choice to get out of that fight or flight and use that fight or flight when needed to protect yourself. But you always have a choice. I think a big problem is with messes is a lot of times we feel like we're stuck. And when we feel like we're stuck, we're unable then to see options and choices, and things become bigger, and they look like obstacles we can't get around. So getting around that idea that you're not stuck, I think, is the first step, and recognizing no matter what, we are never stuck. Our options might not be the greatest, but we are not stuck.
Right. Absolutely. There's, at least we have options.
Yes, it may be just something, it may be something little at first. It may not be the option, the best option where you want to end up, and it may just be an option to have a different mindset or a choice, or to look at something a little bit different. But those small steps, there's always a small step that we can take.
Oh, absolutely. And those baby steps, they add up. I liken it to, you take a snowball and just keep rolling and rolling and rolling. And it pretty soon you just have this big, ginormous snowball. It adds up. And pretty soon you're going to look behind you and be like, wow, I have come a long way.
Yeah, and it's not easy, by any means. I don't want to make this sound like it's an easy and you can just flip a choice. But it was interesting because the women I spoke to for the book, their messes were all different. And, of course, there are messes that some women weren't ready to speak about. But the tools that they used to get through their messes were also very different, based on the woman or the situation. But several of them really did point to the small steps. Mm-hmm. For one woman, her small steps, it was to do something every day that scared her. And it had nothing to do, her steps had nothing to do with the trauma itself, but they were little things such as, after a yoga class, go up and talk to somebody, a student in the class, say hello, not even a long drawn out conversation, but right. She was shy. And so that was uncomfortable. So that little thing scared her, but she forced herself to do something every day that scared her, something little, because by doing that, she slowly realized her strength and how strong she was. So when it came time to make some big moves that directly correlated with her mess, it wasn't as scary because she built up her faith in herself with those small little steps.
Yeah, she got used to putting herself outside of her comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where growth happens.
And she was also able to see herself in a different way by doing that. Some of the messages that she had of who she believed she was, for instance, that little step, I believe that I'm shy, or I believe I don't know how to start a conversation, or I believe no one will want to talk to me, or I believe I don't have anything, interesting to say. By taking these little steps and recognizing, hey, people do talk to me when I say hello, and whatever it is, those helped her also rewrite some of her beliefs that weren't serving her.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your book. Um, it's quite a journey that you went on to write it. So I definitely want to make sure we mention it. And I want to talk a little bit about Cindy, who is in your book.
Yes. Yes. So Cindy was my former paralegal. I used to practice law, and I had worked with her about 20 years ago. And when we were working together, she had a son and a daughter, cutest family. They were both her husband and wife met in the military. He was a teacher. She's a paralegal. Kids were athletic. Flash forward, and when we reconnected, her son was on the streets. And I learned that it was a 10-year journey for the family, and it's a continuing journey, but it was a 10-year journey where he was addicted to heroin and alcohol. It started from a trip home from college. He had his wisdom teeth taken out and was prescribed Oxycontin, and what felt like overnight, dropped out of college and was on the streets addicted to drugs. They can't say that was the direct correlation to the narcotics, but that was the order of things. So anyway, speaking to Cindy about her journey really changed my life in the way I interact daily with the homeless population that we see in Seattle. We have a homeless problem in Seattle, like many cities around the U.S. And her story really changed the way I interact daily with people in Seattle.
I saw in the intro that your that your publicist sent me. That now you carry around backpacks. I used to call them blessing bags, but that's basically what you carry around now for the homeless, and I love that idea.
Yes, that's exactly how she changed my life. Speaking to her, I recognized that I had lost this ability to see. I chose not to see homeless people as individuals. When I got to the corner of my car, I used to turn and look the other way, not make eye contact. And after speaking to her and her family story, I started recognizing the homeless people in Seattle again as somebody's, son, somebody's daughter, brother, sister, mother, father. And I did, as you mentioned, I do to this day carry backpacks in my car with supplies. And I've had the most amazing conversations now at the stoplight, those short few-minute conversations with the person on the street when I'm handing over the backpack. And when that happens, it absolutely brightens my day. I had a man look at my car. He liked my car, and he said, I am going to get that car one day. I promise you, I'm going to get that car one day. And I recognized, his eyes lit up. He has dreams. And it was the first time that I really realized that he's in the homeless, just because they're on the streets in a bad situation does not mean that they want to stay there or that they don't have dreams like the rest of us. And we're not as different as I allowed myself to believe for a while. So yes, absolutely. She changed my life for the better.
I love that. I love how somebody else's story can make such an impact on, your life and other people's lives as well. It makes me think of there was a homeless guy, I want to say around Chicago, who had just this amazing radio voice. And I think he used to be a radio announcer at one point in time, and then he ended up homeless. And, people would talk to him and they would record him, doing like little broadcast things on the street at the stoplight and stuff. And, he absolutely wanted to get off the streets, and now today he's he got recognized, and he got off the street, he got cleaned up, and he's working and giving back to the community now. And I love how those little stories just impact so many people.
Yes, and it's just learning to hear somebody's story. And like my friend Cindy, if you had just, met her in conversation, or actually anyone, you wouldn't recognize, you wouldn't think, oh, this is a mom that's suffering because her son is addicted and on the streets. It wouldn't cross your mind necessarily. Right. You wouldn't know why maybe it looked like she was having a bad day. And some of these women I spoke to that I had even known for years, because I knew every woman at some level in the book, personally knew them. I was surprised when I learned that I didn't know their mess, including struggles with anxiety and depression, things that I thought I should know about my friends just from being a good friend, that I didn't know because I never had asked the story or the question. So going through this process really hit home how connected all of us are, and how all of us have, a mess. And if we listen to one another's story, how much how much more of an understanding we can get about why we believe certain things, and why we think certain things, or why we might disagree sometimes.
Right. Exactly. You don't know what somebody else is going through. One of my favorite things to do is when I'm out, I'm at the store or something like that, and I see somebody who, maybe looks like they're having a bad day or something. I always make it a point to try and compliment them. And it just, it could just be, I really love that sweater, or your hair is amazing, or, whatever it is. And it instantly lifts them up. It's just the smallest thing. Doesn't cost me anything,
Yeah. I love that. I am going to make it a point to do that. And I'll think of you when I do that. I love that. I love that even as a challenge. And, it's not an insincere challenge, because we can find something that we appreciate about anyone we come across. So I love that. I'm going to challenge myself to do that the next time I'm in the store.
And I'll do it even if they don't look like they're having a bad day. I went up to somebody the other day who was at the store, and she was in a wheelchair, motorized wheelchair, and it was this really cool purple. And I'm like, I absolutely love your chair. And she got so excited, and it was nice. It was it was like 30 seconds, and that was it. I lifted her spirits, it lifted my spirits. Every time I saw her in the store, I got a smile on my face,
That's great. It's so contagious, right?
It is.
that compliments and being kind is contagious. It's just as contagious as being unkind, unfortunately, but it's so much easier, and it feels so much better to be kind.
So much better to be kind. Absolutely. Well, Shari, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us today. This has been fun. How can our listeners find you?
So my website is, it's a long one. I didn't consult with a branding expert when I made it, but my website is called animperfectlyperfectlife.com. So animperfectlyperfectlife.com. And on any social media place, Facebook, everywhere, Instagram, it's also An Imperfectly Perfect Life.
Perfect. Awesome. And listeners, I will have all of Shari's information in the show notes, the link to her website, social media, to her book, everything. If you're listening for one of our partner stations, just go to releasingtraumapodcast.com, pull up Shari's episode, and all her contact information will be there. Well, Shari, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you. And thank you for my new challenge. I'm looking forward to going to the store now.
I can't wait to hear how it goes. You'll have to let me know.
I will. Thank you.
All right, listeners, as always, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you in the next show.